We don't have anyone around, and I was by myself and Oscar. He wouldn't go with others, he wouldn't go and make new friends. He's a bit hesitant. So I said to them, like, you know, he's like that. He wouldn't talk to everybody. He will just sit and play with his cars and take hours and hours. He can sit by himself and he doesn't actually get involved with new activities. I had discussion with Kat.
Sometimes he struggled with routine, and it could be, and sometimes he was very stuck in routine where he just wanted the same thing, and then if something had changed, he didn't cope with that change. And at first, when I had to use Epic, I was kind of like, oh, what is this? All it was any child that I felt needed a little bit of extra support. You'd fill out some forms, do some observation on children, and then you'd get in contact with Kim, who plays a big part of it, and she's been amazing.
I oversee the rollout of our Early Intervention Services program.
And then she told me, why don't you come on and join the meeting with Jacinta.
So I'm here to actually help the educators to work with their family.
And then I lead the meeting just as a conduit between everyone in the room, ensuring that the conversation is child focused. It's a bit of a thing to throw around, you know, that the parent is the expert on their own child. We really want to make that real and tangible for parents and for families.
Coming here is looking at the teachers and telling them my difficulties and finding the answers, all the answers. It's like making new friends. It's like the best thing.
Jacinta's at the stage of assessing Oscar and talking to Mum about whether he is school ready.
The really important thing, it's one of the things that really comes out from it, is that the families are able to identify where their child needs support.
They are the only way I feel like, you know, helping me through all this difficult time when I was by myself with Oscar. And I wouldn't, because at that time I didn't have anyone.
I know Mum's on her own here with Oscar, and you know, so that just led us to do the best we can for Oscar.
All I know is these guys are helping me. They're friends to me. Hi, my name is Meena Rani and I'm Oscar's mum.
And what's your name? Who is this?
Oscar.
Oscar! Okay, Sarah.
I'll do whatever it takes, you know, for Oscar.
High five.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Oscar.
Okay.
Oh.
Good boy.
So we're heading to Crown Street Stables Cafe in Flemington, where they offer this incredible program giving people with a disability opportunity to have real job experience. So I'm excited to get in there and have a chat to them.
We come in every Tuesday, weekly, and we get the opportunity to interact with the cafe staff, with the trainee program, the people in it, and my clients are able to order for themselves and have opportunities here that they don't really have in other cafes or other venues. They're able to look at them and go, I can get there. And some of my clients have said that to me before. They've said, you know, I can work here, like I can do that. I can work somewhere else that their field that they prefer to do, you know, and that's really special because they see someone that they can relate to.
After chatting to Beck, it's really clear to me how important this program is for people with a disability. And I've just learned that one of the graduates from this program now works at Ascot Vale Leisure Centre. I'm going to head down and have a chat to them.
I think the biggest thing is giving someone a chance. To see giving Gemma an opportunity to come aboard as an employee you know, it's all about giving a chance. So the program did give her those skills there. The most satisfying thing as a team here, that in putting Gemma on, was knowing that the number one thing she wanted to do was work in a health and leisure facility. So to be able to give her her dream job has been very satisfying here as well, and just very happy to have her aboard on the team. So.
Hi, I'm Gemma Berry and I work at Ascot Bay Leisure Centre. I'm in charge of the customer service, and so I'm helping the gym, taking a class for the oldie over 50 years old. My favourite part of the traineeship was meeting people and meeting customers. And I like to meet lots of people, and it was very interesting because I got to learn lots of stuff. It helped with my confidence, and I'm better talking now than I was before. If you're thinking about doing the traineeship, you should do it because it gives you confidence, and when you move out, you can cook for yourself and all that.
I would love to see more places like Ascot Vale Leisure Centre giving people with a disability a chance. Gemma is the perfect example of why we as a community should support businesses like Crown Street Stables Cafe. Something as simple as a piece of cake and a coffee could really make an impact.
Welcome everybody to this, our ordinary meeting of Council for the 27th of August 2019, which is now officially open. A warm welcome to members of the public gallery who have joined us tonight at the Civic Centre, as well as those watching from home via live streaming. Thank you for joining us. As well as being live streamed, the recording of this meeting will also be available on our website, so attendees in the gallery are advised that their presence may be recorded. And I'd also just ask that mobile phones please be switched to silent during the meeting. On behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, spirits, community members past and present. I'd also like to extend this respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Councillors, I have received an apology from Councillor Serace for tonight's meeting. Can I please have a motion that the apology be noted? Councillor Gatchimarichi, seconder. Councillor Sypek, thank you. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimously carried. Councillor Lawrence is seeking approved leave of absence from the 2nd of September to the 18th of September inclusive. Councillors, can I please have a mover and a seconder that Councillor Lawrence's leave of absence be granted? Councillor Gatchimarichi, Councillor Sypek, second. We'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillors, can I please have a mover and a seconder that the minutes from the ordinary meeting of Council held on Tuesday, 13th of August 2019, please be confirmed? Councillor Sypek, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lawrence, thank you. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Does any councillor have a conflict of interest in any item on the agenda this evening? No. Councillors, are there any presentations tonight? I don't believe so. I'll move on to the petitions and joint letters, and there is one petition to be tabled tonight. So can I please have a councillor present the petition? Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor. Council has received a petition with 18 signatures regarding proposed parking changes to Cashmere Street, Travancore. It's quite a long preamble, so in summary, the residents have written regarding Council's proposed parking changes and have suggested some preferences for Council's consideration. So as such, Council resolves to I move that Council resolves to 1, receive and note the petition, 2, refer this matter to the Director of Planning and Development for investigation and reporting back to Council, and 3, to advise the petition organiser accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Marshall. Thank you. I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. There are no questions tonight from the public, and there are also no special committees on tonight's agenda, reports from special committees on tonight's agenda. So I will move straight to reports. So the first report on tonight's agenda relates to a planning application at 42 Moore Road, Airport West, use and development of a vehicle store and ancillary use. Councillors, do I have a motion, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move an alternative.
Yes.
And the alternative is that Council issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a permit in relation to the planning permit application number MV 1342019 for the use and development of a vehicle storage and the use at 42 Moore Street, Airport West, on the following grounds. The proposed hours of operation are excessive and will have a detrimental effect on the residents and the amenities of the neighbourhood land. The proposed use will generate excessive noise, which will have an adverse effect on the residents' amenities of the neighbouring lands as well. The proposal will cause adverse traffic impacts on the surrounding areas, which will be subjected to an unreasonable amounts of traffic, and this will be a 24-hour operation.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. You added something to your words there that wasn't up in point 3.
Forget the last 3 words.
So take it as read up.
Take it as read.
On the screen there? Okay. Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Byrne, thank you. Councillors, are there any questions regarding this motion? Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'll speak very factual here. What we have here is a planning application that is retrospective to what's been going on in the area. This allotment was used as a car park without a permit, without any authority, and they've now come to council asking permission after our officers notified them that they were illegally running a car park there. The problem that we have here is there was no permit, there was no respect for the residents and no respect for this council, and now they want a permit. Well, that's probably not grounds for dismissal. The grounds for dismissal and for refusal are excessive effects on the neighbourhood, excessive noise, and with the third runway being introduced at Melbourne Airport, which will be a 24-hour operation, there will be cars coming in and out of this place every single hour, every single half hour, every 15 minutes. There will be cars coming in and out. And how would you, as a resident living across the road, feel if you had traffic lights and cars starting up across the road from you every hour on the hour? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will. I probably have a slightly different, obviously agree with the motion and Councillor Sypek's words, but probably a slightly different tack towards it. I understand that there is history involved with this site, but when looking at it, I'm sort of looking at just with the future, I suppose, looking forward and looking at this application and how it fits in with our MV 2040 strategy and our overall visioning for Airport West. So we've got a very large site, 1,300 square metres, and it's on the northern side of Moore Road. And the planning application before us is effectively one of the, where you drop your car, you get picked up by a shuttle and you get taken to Tullamarine Airport. And it's for, as Councillor Sypek said, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, we all know that a lot of flights take off in the morning, especially ones to Sydney, and they land early, and therefore we'll be having extreme amenity issues for the residents who are directly on the other side of the road. I'm very mindful of that really sensitive interface, and even though it's zoned commercial, when you've got residents on one side, I think that there's an expectation on what the other side's going to be. And that's what we have in our MV 2040 strategy. And whilst our Airport West structure plan isn't quite there, and it is something that we are absolutely embedding, hopefully, into our neighbourhood guidelines very soon, and we want development there, I don't see green, I don't see thriving, I don't see vibrancy, I don't see attractiveness. I don't see that this is the type of application that we want in this particular part of Airport West. I've touched on the interface with Moore Road, the light spill and the noise pollution, and the inconsistency with the MV 2040 strategy. I do take note in the officer's report that it is only for a short period of time, that there would be a 3-year lease and then a potential extension on that. And we are in a bit of a pickle in terms of what can be allowed, because I understand that the owners of the site obviously want some rental whilst they're planning what's going to go in this commercial zone. But this is not at all in line with what we have in our indoor strategies, or what will be in line with the future indoor strategies. So I won't be approving this application tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? No? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. The next report is 10.2 and is titled Amendment C193 Moon, introducing the MV 2040 strategy into the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. So, councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Gatchie-Morici, thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion?
The officer's recommendation.
Sorry. Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconder for Councillor Gauthier-Muricci's motion? Councillor Cusack, thank you. Councillors, do I have any questions on that motion? Otherwise, I'll ask Councillor Gauthier-Muricci to speak, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is obviously the next piece in the 2040 process. The 2040 strategy we've brought to Council a couple of times, so I think everyone's aware of the strategy piece, but overarchingly that it transforms how we deliver for the community, particularly in terms of the neighbourhood planning approach. And by introducing the 2040 strategy into the planning scheme, it helps us to ensure the land use and development policy frameworks are in place to deliver those outcomes by guiding our decision making to ensure that Moonee Valley is fair, thriving, connected, green and beautiful. The key aspects are covered in the report, but for those who are watching at home and haven't read the report, the key aspects include a community vision for a healthy city, the 5 themes being fair, thriving, connected, green and beautiful, the 13 20-minute neighbourhoods, the directions around community hubs, multi-purpose pavilions and co-working spaces, and increasing our tree canopy to enhance our urban forest. So what happened after the 2040 strategy was developed is this piece comes into play. It was exhibited for 5 weeks and there were 16 submissions that were made by members of the community. The panel hearing on the 15th of 16th of July, and then a report came back to us on the 30th of July. I just wanted to take the opportunity in here to thank those who had participated in the exhibition process and made submissions. There were a number of people who made submissions as well as presented at the panel hearing. So I think that's an opportune time for us to thank those who have participated in this process from our community. The panel comment in the report was that the amendment's well-founded and strategically justified, and they commended the extensive strategic work. You can also see on page 329 of the attachments how much more strategic work follows on as part of this process. But this is the final stage of adopting the amendment, including the changes that were recommended by the planning panel, and then we submit it to the Minister for planning approval. It's probably also a really opportune time to thank the team at Moonee Valley City Council who put so much work into this entire process. That extensive strategic work is primarily their effort, so thank you to them as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. We've been striving in this council to develop a planning documents that provides for an integrated approach to planning that takes into account not just the everyday mundane thing about where the Lego blocks might be placed on a block, but to actually look at how any proposal works across the neighbourhood and across the city. And as Councillor Gauthier-Muricci has just said, how it interfaces with things like the notions of the 20-minute city with work in the future and so on like that. We've also got some significant issues that are coming up for us in respect of how do we manage transport, how do we manage the environment and so on like that within a growing community that has got lots of stresses, and on that basis we needed to go forward with a new proposal. So 2040 has been on the march for quite some time, and so this is part, as Councillor Gauthier-Muricci has said, that the other one plays a half-back flank for the Upper Kambukta West. As Councillor Gauthier-Muricci has said, this is part of the process that's ongoing, and that we do need to continue to keep that process working. I noticed that during the public exhibition and submissions, there were 16 submissions made, 9 of them in support, 5 required some addressing of some significance of issues, and 1 sought to abandon the whole process altogether. So I think when we start to think a bit about how the community is reacting to this, there is a broad support for what has gone on, and that broad support's been garnered through considerable consultation over a period of time. So I think that there's only one way forward. We need to support this motion, and note also that this council, through the work in 2040, has really made some groundbreaking decisions in respect of where planning goes to and how local strategies for local government areas are looked at and how they may be improved in the future. So in a lot of ways we're setting best practice through this process.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Marshall?
Thank you. Now, the report obviously sets out what has been a very lengthy process to get to here, and I think we can acknowledge without any criticism whatsoever that it probably hasn't been the cleanest process in some ways, and that, for the most part, has been because of what were significant changes at the state planning level. So our officers have had to respond very quickly to those changes and do a significant amount of work. So obviously this is a translation, as Councillor Gauci-Marici said, of MV 2040 into the planning scheme, and also along with the planning scheme review that we're required to undertake under the legislation. So it's sort of been brought into one planning scheme amendment. The panel report is good reading and certainly recommended. If you look at the recommendations and the changes that they've suggested, they're relatively minor in the scheme of things. And again, as Councillor Gauci-Marici noted, the positive commentary, which is always nice to see in panel reports rather than other ones we've had that perhaps haven't been quite so complimentary. And I really do want to acknowledge the work of the council officers in getting to this point. You know, this whole concept of a 20-minute neighbourhood planning has been one that's persisted for so long, but to actually really bring that into something that's meaningful rather than this set of words in that just have previously been in the planning scheme, I think is a massive achievement. And I suspect that the work that we've done will form the basis of the work that a lot of other councils do. So I think our officers certainly need to be commended for that. I do note that I have shared some of the concerns of the submitters, and particularly around the housing stuff, and I was still sort of on the fence. I read the panel report and I think on balance I can accept what they've said, but ultimately this will be a situation where the neighbourhood implementation plans, and it's mentioned repeatedly, you get the sense very much that theme about how important they are to be done quickly as possible and to be done correctly. And they'll bring in all of the other bits and pieces of work that we've had going on. Obviously in Airport West case there was a structure plan review, so that will be part of that work. We've had neighbourhood character reviews that will all be brought into this, issues around zones, all of that sort of stuff. The heritage work will all feed into these neighbourhood implementation plans, and they are going to be absolutely essential. And for people who might not have necessarily paid that much attention to MV 2040, you will certainly, I strongly suspect, want to pay attention to the neighbourhood implementation plans. So I'm happy to support the motion. As I said, it's a significant amount of work by the officers, and so I do just say congratulations on that.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Byrne?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will. I'm speaking in support of the motion. Again, probably as Councillor Marshall said, on balance when looking at everything, it's quite interesting that in something so big there were 16 people who wrote in, and whilst we can say that the majority of that was showing support, I know that sitting across this table we have many people in the community who are quite frustrated with council in terms of what's been happening with development in our city. Not through a lack of trying, as the councillors who have already spoken have already said, the amount of work that the officers have put into this piece of work and previous piece of works is enormous. There's so much work that's going in, and we just need to make sure we hit the nail on the head, and I really do believe that we're on the right track with this. I really do. And once we have these neighbourhood plans in place, people will really be able to see the future vision for Moonee Valley. I'll just read from 3.18. The successful implementation of the MV 2040 strategy will require the timely preparation and implementation of the neighbourhood plans. And what we've already discussed tonight is some of the issues that we've had with Airport West, and it is great to see that Airport West will be one of the top ones off the rank in terms of neighbourhood plans, and it is an absolute necessity. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes from that and how it all clicks in together. They're all the pieces of the puzzle, and when we finally get that completed picture, it's going to be beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? No, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. The next agenda item is 10.3 and is titled The Opportunity to Work with DHHS on Integrated Master Plan. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Motion, please. Oh, Councillor Sypek, thank you. Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cusack, thank you. Are there any questions regarding this motion, councillors? I'll ask Councillor Sypek to speak to the motion.
I think it's very self-explanatory, Madam Mayor. It's basically we'll be working in conjunction with the government department.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak to the motion?
Just briefly, Mayor. I suppose at the end of the day, this council's got to be at the dance so that we can put in our contribution on a number of issues. The problems that we do have a number of significant reservations around the whole of the redevelopment, and there are a number of concerns about how this has come to us in such a hurry, and that the Department of Health and Human Services is progressing something at such a significant gallop, and those are really important issues, and I'm cognizant of those. But at the end of it all, we need to also have a mechanism by which this council allows us to continue to go on and have conversations with the department. And those conversations, I hope, continue to be really vigorous ones and really robust ones, because there are many, as I said, many issues down on that estate that are considerable and far from resolved. But I'm happy enough to talk about the notion of engagement. I'm happy enough to talk about at least continuing on talking to Department of Health and Human Services, and I recognise the importance of that. I also would hope that this council, through that engagement, provides an opportunity for leadership for the rest of the community to come in on the coattails of council to be able to get to the table. That we are consistently bugged by the fact that state government organisations, and in particular one that represents Health and Human Services, has not got a good track record for consultation, that does not actually engage really, really well with either the people that it's serving or working with or providing services to down on the estate, and it's not a particularly clever organisation thinking about its level of impact that it can have on the whole of Flemington. But having said that again, I'm happy enough for us to continue exploring options with them and to explore that notion of engagement, given those quarantine points that I just raised.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Marshall?
I had to think about what I was going to say about this, and I'll be considered in what I say. So I think the reality is to not proceed with this would be nothing short of churlish, and the reality is that council has served its community poorly in other matters where ultimately we don't have control, but we haven't had a seat at the table, and that's just the reality. So I absolutely agree with what Councillor Cusack has said. We need to have a seat at the table, and if we don't, things will pass us by, and that is just the reality. We know that that's how it will occur. Again, there's a lot of sense in looking at this on a precinct-wide basis. We have to think about how we manage this as a council with our community, who are still devastated about what's happened, obviously, out of the council decision with the hub, and how we start rebuilding goodwill and trust. And so that's going to be part of all of this. Obviously, we're working with DHHS, but if we're going out there having discussions with community, how we make them believe what we say. And that's just the reality, how we make DHHS believe what we say. So absolutely, on the grounds that Councillor Cusack has said, you can't turn around and not have a seat at the table with these types of things unless you're an idiot. And I'd like to think that we're not all a bunch of idiots.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is 10.4 and relates to the revision to the grading of 15 Clarence Street, Flemington, in amendments C200 Moon and C201 Moon. So, councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Lawrence, thank you.
I move the officer's recommendation, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Sypek, thank you. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to the motion?
Only very briefly, Madam Mayor. This came before council at council's last meeting, where an alternative refusal was rejected by this council. Council's previous decision to grant a planning permit for the construction of a new dwelling at 15 Clarence Street, for me, is an appropriate outcome to request the grading of 15 Clarence Street, proposed HO 461, be revised to a non-contributory under amendments C200 Moon and C201 Moon, and grant consent to the currently suspended demolition request. I support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Sypek, do you wish to speak to the motion? Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Marshall?
Yeah. Mayor, I'll be speaking against the motion, and I really should just get YouTube out and just play what I said 2 weeks ago, because nothing's changed in that situation. And I've raised my concerns about this report being brought back. You know, I'm really mindful that the officer's recommendation is just that. It's not a motion. It has no standing other than a recommendation from the experts at our council, and that's something we sometimes agree with what they're saying, often we don't. So what happened 2 weeks ago is that a motion was on the floor, wasn't supported, but the matter was still considered and debated. So I am perplexed as to why we're considering this again, because to me, you don't get councillors had the opportunity to foreshadow and put up a motion, but didn't, and you'd have to argue that was the will of the council. So it's, as I said, on that point, from a process perspective, I'm disappointed to see this here again. To the substantive issues, I suppose if you listen to the point just raised then about the planning permit grant, I would have less of an issue in relation to this if for every other live planning permit for properties within the Heritage Gap Study we were doing the same thing. But we're not. We are singling this one out, and that's the thing that concerns me. Again, if you're going to be consistent and you're going to say that the reason is because that there's a live planning permit on foot, well then surely you do that for every single property that's affected. But as I have also said last time, that ultimately the question is this a contributory property or not? And the previous heritage advice has been that it is a contributory property. So what does that mean for how we view our advice about from heritage experts? I mean, that's, to me, the whole thing. Are we just ignoring it when it suits us, or are we just saying, oh, well, in this instance, we're just going to flip like that? It just concerns me about how we treat our advice and about how we view these particular matters. So there's nothing that's changed from 2 weeks ago when we considered this. I acknowledge, again, the difficulties that owners can find themselves in this situation, absolutely. So I'm not immune to that, or I'm not being ignorant of that at all. But the difficulty, these are planning processes, and this is how these processes work. And, you know, it's really frustrating and concerning to me if we start playing around with gradings for properties and tweaking things, not based on evidence, not based on the evidence of the heritage experts, but based on other factors. So I won't be supporting the motion. As I said, I don't know why we're actually considering this again, given a decision of council was made 2 weeks ago.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Cusack.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'm not speaking in support of the motion either. I was concerned that the motion has brought, this recommendation has been brought back to the table a second time, when clearly the council's will a fortnight ago was not to debate it, and that to reject the motion that was on foot that night, and to leave the situation as it stands, not to change to accommodate the situation that's proposed in this motion. The critical issues here are, where does this council stand in respect of its heritage overlays, and where does it stand in respect of its heritage studies, and where does it stand in respect of the value that it places on its residences and neighbourhoods that tell the story about how this community was formed and why this community is unique in Melbourne. And there's no Flemington in Port Melbourne, there's no Flemington in Dandenong. Flemington is off Racecourse Road. And that we have a heritage study that says quite clearly that Clarence Street and Marshall Street and that environment around there is critical, and that it should remain intact. I said at the last council meeting that if the people in Yarra, for argument's sake, hadn't stood up for the workers' cottages in Abbotsford, we would have nothing but cleared out areas there too, because people said, oh, they were only rubbish. What we had cleared out in Fitzroy years ago was considered rubbish, and what we ended up with was Atherton Gardens and high-rise everywhere that has never worked. And yet now, the most prized bits of real estate in Fitzroy, for argument's sake, is the workers' cottages. Go figure. So here we are in Flemington confronting the same issue 40 years on. I think that while we have an issue that is about planning permit got in front of by a few weeks of the gap study going through, and yes, there is an exposure for council in terms of potential costs or something like that. That is if it goes to appeal. That is if council was not successful at appeal. But at the end of it all, we have to, surely as a group of councillors representing our community, stand up for what the notion of heritage actually is, not be swayed by the fact that there is an opportunity to pick off bits of a heritage study. I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Nation?
So, can I just foreshadow a motion?
Foreshadow, yep.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I will speak against the motion on the floor and concur with my fellow ward councillors, and I'm in reality a little bit perplexed as to why, or what it is other councillors don't see in this property or in the heritage gap analysis that they may have seen in other properties that have come before us with planning applications, such as Glass Street, Elmer Street, 60 or 66 Buckley Street. I don't know if it's the facade or its location within the context of the area, or if it's the brief or the statement in the Heritage Gap study as to whether or not it should be included. I don't know. And 2 weeks ago, when Councillor Marshall put up a motion that I thought was fairly straightforward and probably fairly consistent with our gap study, but the way that we had approached many properties that may or may not have heritage aspects. And then it obviously was lost, and no councillors, from my recollection, no other councillors spoke to the report. So it left me feeling perplexed as to what it is with this property that other councillors don't see. The Heritage Gap study, the statement or the quotation from it, the Clarence Street and Marshall Street precinct is of historic and aesthetic significance to the city of Moonee Valley, and that the Clarence and Marshall Streets area was distinguished by the intactness of the original periods of development, with the stages of development clearly evident in each street and a lack of post-war redevelopment. And that precinct concept, which is stated in the gap study, is so important, because if you do pick off properties that have that heritage significance, you don't get the intactness. And so while 15 Clarence Street may just look like a rundown single property, as soon as you remove its contributory status, and that intactness of that precinct is, that precinct does not keep its intactness, then it's a very slippery slope. So I really urge my fellow councillors to please consider this property and consider not removing the contributory status that our Heritage Gap study has singled out for this precinct and this property. Removing its status just for the sake there's a live planning permit, I don't think is a good way to treat and respect the heritage and history of properties in our area. So for those councillors who didn't support Councillor Marshall's motion, she has foreshadowed and a possible alternate motion if this one fails. So I please ask you to reconsider and hopefully keep this property and this precinct as the brilliant snapshot it is of that period of development within our city.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Byrne?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will. I think last week, a fortnight ago, it was described as a really tricky situation. I can't remember who used that word, and that's what it is, because we had a report come before us and to say, which had particular heritage advice, to say there wasn't a lot of heritage, and then 2 weeks later we had a gap study that said that it was extremely important in terms of the precinct. And as a councillor, heritage isn't my forte. I go what's in reports and I read officers' recommendations, and I understand that, we then make decisions off that, and it's really difficult when we, I suppose, make a decision for one fortnight and then the next fortnight no one clicked on to the fact that something that we approved the week before was now in the gap study. And it is difficult, but I suppose we haven't really won on these heritage issues before. Glass Street, it cost us a lot of money to not get any result, and the difference with this one is, yes, we approved the planning permit, but we've now got the demolition request as well. And I could and ah and sit on the fence, but at the end of the day, I feel that this house is, as Councillor Nation said, it's really run down, and I think that there's a term for it, and I don't have the term on the top of my head, but it's basically where people can let properties run down. And this doesn't have an individual heritage significance on it. It's on the precinct. And I don't even know whether that makes it better or worse, to be honest. Take one property out, do you destroy the precinct? Well, are we gambling on the fact that it won't? Yes, I think so. If it was an individual, would it be treated differently? There's so many questions, and it's hard because there's obviously different heritage opinions coming towards us. It is a tricky situation, and yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Lawrence, would you like to close?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I thank all councillors for their contributions. I think the term, Councillor Byrne, is practical. Practical in the decision making of this council, and sometimes we've got to put aside those heritage type issues that, and I'm just as supportive of a lot of heritage, but we have to realise that there have been certain decisions that have been made previously that are going to make life difficult for ourselves as not just councillors but as a council. And you know, times are tough economically, and I'm sure this council needs to only be more practical in that aspect. And on this case, the practicalities are the ones that I'm very mindful of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's Councillor Sypek, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Lawrence. All those against? Councillor Nation, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Gatchi-Marici. That is carried on the casting vote of the Mayor. So that item is carried. The next agenda item is 10.5 and it relates to the Council Plan 2017 to 21, end of year progress report for 18-19. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Council Plan motion, please. Councillor Sypek. Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cusack. Thank you. Are there any questions, councillors, relating to the council plan? Otherwise, I'll ask Councillor Sypek to speak. If that's a procedural motion, I'll have to put that to the vote. A procedural motion, so it doesn't need to be seconded, but I'll have to put that to the vote. So if councillors would like this motion to be put straight to the vote, I'll first ask for those for that motion to put it to the vote. Anybody? All those against? Okay. Cannot put that motion straight to the vote, Councillor Sypek, at this time. So if you do not wish to speak, I'll move to Councillor Cusack to speak.
It's important to note that this council has been moving progressively over a 4-year plan towards achieving a number of outcomes, and we spoke earlier about how 2040, although it's being read now into our municipal statement, our planning documents, it has been a behind-the-scenes guiding light for a lot of what we've been doing. And I think that it would be churlish of us as a council not to consider how what has been achieved and what has been done in the course of the last 12 months or so, and that why we should be celebrating what's happened in 18-19. Now, I know in the report there are points that are made about things, about projects that are incomplete and will be carried over. But in a longer term plan, those things will always tend to occur. We have had blockages because of changing circumstances that have altered our cases. But let's just for a second consider against, and I must first of all thank the officers for their input and effort over the course of the 12 months to make some of these things happen. But I'm just lining up some of the thoughts against the key themes of 2040, and that there has been the acquisition of new land for expanded public areas in and around the Moonee Ponds area, and that will progress and flow into other areas in the municipality over the course of the next few years as other places are identified. Against our theme of being green, we've delivered a number of sustainable programs to residents, businesses and schools. And just to give you a bit of a look at that, in 2018-19, 38 sustainability education events was carried out by giving 1,315 people an opportunity to participate in that area. My Moonee Valley Smart Gardens workshops were significant in that. Green living, the solar power and battery storage information sessions and the likes of that. We also run 4 sustainable school forums and 2 early years environment network meetings were held. An additional 291 green living newsletters were signed up in 2018-19, and councils provided energy advisory service to residents to access independent expert advice. Can I have just another minute?
Yes.
The other really big one is around the Flemington Community Revitalisation Project, which has been funded for $650,000 over 2.5 years. The project aims to deliver 70 employment outcomes in partnerships with Jobs Victoria Employment Network, the Flemington Bridge Housing Development and the Major Project Skills Guarantee, as well as the Public Tenant Employment Program. And to date, we've got 28 contract roles going through that. 2 work experience people within community development, 2 paid internships with community development, 17 part-time roles in cleaning, video production, retail, education, aged care and security. These are all important issues that make our community continue to tick. And so that's why I voted to go beyond just putting this motion. I think our community deserves to have on record in this chamber some of the effort that has been made and some of the successes that are really coming out of the effort of the 2018-19 plan.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Would any other councillor like to say a few words? Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor, and I concur with Councillor Cusack that it is nice to reflect on some of the excellent work our council is doing, particularly linked to the council plan, which is, I guess, one of the defining documents of our term as a council. The 2017 to 2021 plan, obviously, was one of the pieces of work we all contributed to in this current term of council. I want to just touch on 3 key projects and 3 real key success stories of our council plan to date, that relate to young people in our municipality and what we're doing for them. So Councillor Cusack mentioned the equitable employment outcomes for young people living on the Flemington Public Housing Estate, so I won't touch on that as well. I did want to mention, secondly, the Thriving Minds Youth Mental Health Program that Council's helping to plan and implement in schools to address the increasing levels of psychological distress experienced by young people in Moonee Valley. And the progress comments on that particular project. Staff delivered 2-day youth mental health first aid training at Rosehill Secondary College and Buckley Park Secondary College. Staff also delivered a 2-day youth mental health first aid training session to the Australian Muslim Social Services Agency, and staff conducted teacher briefings, parent briefings and facilitated student support meetings at Rosehill Secondary and Buckley Park Secondary Schools. Another of the third key project that I wanted to mention that involves young people in our municipality is the delivery of an integrated youth counselling and case management service to address the increasing levels of psychological distress experienced by young people in Moonee Valley. And that's some individual counselling and youth support services, equaling 134 hours of support. And in 2018-19, 127 young people were supported. 35 were giving secondary consultations, and that equaled more than 710 individual hours of counselling. So there's a lot that our council is doing behind the scenes for the youth in our city, and it's something that I was extremely conscious of when we closed the Wilson Street Youth Hub, was to ensure that our youth were still getting support and getting up-to-date and contemporary support, because we know this is a moving space and the world becomes a very different place every year or 2 years for young people in our city. So I think it's fantastic that we've integrated these programs into our council plan. Our youth team's continuing to look at ways at supporting youth, and it's fantastic to see that for those two categories on this council plan update, a progress report, there's 2 big green ticks. So well done to our youth services team.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Gatchie-Moretti.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just briefly, the others have spoken fairly comprehensively so far, but for me, I think the important thing for a resident who might be sitting at home to be able to see an overarching picture. So 85% of actions are either complete or on track. But in the attachments, if you go to page 373, you can see some of the initiatives for your neighbourhood. So we talked about the 2040 neighbourhoods, and you can go and say, okay, so the things that are happening in Aberfeldy, what's on track, what's been completed, and what's due to be delivered in my area. So if you are watching at home and want some light reading, you can read through all of the 250 initiatives, or you can have a look just at the ones for your area. But I think what underpins all of the council plan and delivery of all of these initiatives and actions is the incredible work of the team that we have at council, who often are unsung as things get delivered for the community. So just another great opportunity to thank the directors, their teams, and all the staff out there who do the hard work behind this plan every day.
Thank you, Councillor Gatchie-Moretti. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Baird and Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't think it would be fair to talk on the council plan without talking about what's effectively the biggest project we've got at the moment, which is money-wise, which is the East Keilor Leisure Centre redevelopment and what's happening with that. It's off track. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. It's documented in here why, and to put short, we went out to tender and the tender costs exceeded budget. And then we have now spent time revising plans to better suit the current market, and construction is due to start shortly. So we had to make some financial decisions instead of blowing out budgets or whatnot. So the plans are slightly different to what some people would have seen. It is what it is. We don't have an endless bucket of money. But the good thing is that construction is due to start, I believe, September, finalising a few things. But that is why, if you're looking at the council plan, that is off track, hopefully with an opening of early 2020. The other thing that I will note is the Airport West LATAM, which was underway, slight hold up, but we've spoken about neighbourhood plans and whatnot already. In terms of that, obviously there's been hold-ups with panels and DALP and whatnot. So these things have been held up, but they're not off the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Lawrence.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, I think there's a lot of positives in this report that can be read there. The pavilions that have been built, the Boeing Reserve, Ormond Park, Buckley Park Pavilion, Cross Keys. I mean, these are new capital works that are, for local sporting clubs and for other community organisations to use. There's a lot of things that we've done from a business promotions point of view. The ice skating ring at Moonee Ponds was a great initiative for the second year. The Bright Lights Winter Nights in Flemington, as well as the Winterfest Progressive Dinner up at Keilor Road, which was a new initiative. But again, it's community engagement and a great way to promote business. What I notice in the report, not the addendum, not the full report, but the report that comes to council, is that there are things that go on in this city that we take for granted. The tree plantings to increase our tree canopy, the rubbish collections, which I know there have been issues with, but we've got on with the job as a council. The playground refurbishments, even down to the new library books that the libraries receive every year, and the multitude of courses that this council carries out, both from a business perspective and from a community interest perspective. So there's a lot of things that go on that we take for granted, but it takes organisation and it takes initiative and it takes time, and council officers have knuckled down, got on with the job, and I give them full marks for their efforts in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? No? Okay, I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the review of governance local law. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Sypek? Did you wish me to move on, or did you want to just double check that, Councillor Sypek?
No, my apologies. I want to move the motion that I've got in front of me. And that is, in the exercise of the powers conferred under section 111 of the Local Government Act 1989, Council resolves to endorse the proposed governance of local laws 2009, endorse the revised meeting protocols, procedure protocols provided as attachment B with the following changes. 6.11F to read directly allocated funds outside council's adopted budget or with otherwise have material financial impact. The second paragraph under section 6.12 to read council will accept an item as an urgent business by resolution if it means the criteria is 6.12A and B. Endorse the local law community impact statement provided as attachment C to accompany the proposed governance local law 2009 for the purpose of the community consultation. Give public notice of its intent to make government's local laws 2019 in accordance with section 119/2 of the Local Government Act 1989 and invite written submissions in relation to the proposed local laws in accordance with section 223 of the Local Government Act 1989. Consider any submissions received on the proposed governance local laws 2019 if required at a section 223 committee of council comprising of councillors to be held on Tuesday the 1st of October 2019 commencing at 5:30 at Moonee Valley City Council, 9 Callaway Avenue, Moonee Ponds.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconder for that motion, please. Seconder? Councillor Byrne, thank you. Are there any questions relating to this motion, councillors? Otherwise, I'll ask Councillor Sypek to speak to the motion.
Well, I won't move a procedure to go straight to the vote this time, Madam Mayor, because last time everyone spoke on it and I misread that one. So I will be happy to let everyone speak on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Can I ask Councillor Byrne if she wishes to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will quickly. I think that it's really important that our council meetings are run well and that meeting procedures are followed, and this is fine-tuning what we have. And then obviously it's up to council laws to ensure that we know them back to front and inside out and everything in between. So hopefully we have really well-run meetings for everyone to follow online. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Marshall?
Thanks, Mayor. I don't want to let down Councillor Sypek. Look, you can see that we're required to review the governance local law, and we have reviewed our meeting procedures a number of times, and it doesn't hurt to continue to tweak them. One of the issues that I've had particularly, and I know I'm one out on this one, is in relation to the amendment process. To me, it doesn't work. It has led to very lengthy and inefficient meeting procedures. So my preference would have been to fine-tune that process. But as I said, I'm not going to go out and go one out on that one. I know that that's not a view shared by my colleagues. But there are a number of refinements in this in relation to the notice of motion provision. I think that they're sensible and they're pragmatic, because you don't want the notices of motion to be misused and have a situation where you have councillors coming to council essentially saying, oh, well, I want 50 grand spent on this, 60 grand spent on that. So we have a budget, we have quite difficult financial circumstances in the sense that we need to be mindful of expenditure. And we have long-term capital works plan, strategic resources plan, which allocate money accordingly. So we do need to be mindful of that. So I think the notice of motion provisions are sensible the way that they've been done. The other refinements too around the dissent motion, the points of clarification, I think that they are good refinements. Ultimately, though, it does come back to the point that Councillor Byrne just made, that we have an obligation as councillors. Obviously, the person chairing the meeting has the greatest obligation at all to be aware of the contents of the meeting procedures, but we all share an obligation as councillors to do our role properly, to actually know how the meeting procedures work. And if we don't, then that's on you.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Nation?
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move a formal amendment, being a point F to the recommendation, which reads, the addition of a point 2.6 under notices and agendas in the meeting procedures protocol that states council commits that the meetings covered by this policy are alcohol-free, being that alcohol will not be served to councillors or staff prior to or during these meetings.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. So that's a formal amendment.
I'm happy to second it.
Which I can ask. I might just have to get that typed up if that's okay. Obviously, councillors haven't had the...
Mayor, can I move the meeting be adjourned until that is typed up, please?
Thank you, yes, thank you. Do I have a seconder for that adjournment meeting? Councillor Kachimachi, I think I just saw you a second earlier. No problems. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. So the meeting will be adjourned for 5 minutes. Thank you. I am now reopening. Thank you. I'm now reopening our ordinary meeting. The proposed formal amendment from Councillor Nation has been written up and is in front of us on the screen under point F. Could I have a seconder, please, for Councillor Nation's formal amendment?
Oh, well, there you go. No.
Councillor Gacci Morici. Thank you. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak to your amendment?
I will, thank you, Mayor. And I think it's very pertinent when we are reviewing how meetings of this council are conducted and looking at how we conduct ourselves, that we also ensure that we, as a council and as councillors, are in line with community standards. And you look at many workplaces, many organisations, and the idea that staff or individuals making decisions on behalf of that organisation are served alcohol prior to a meeting, it doesn't really pass, pardon the pun, the pub test. Thank you. I don't think, it's 2019. I think we have to be a lot more conscious about not just what we say, but what we do. And when I was reviewing these meeting procedures this afternoon, and then walked into the back room at 6 o'clock and saw 3 bottles of wine, I just don't think that is appropriate, particularly when we sit around discussing major infrastructure projects, a budget of $180 million plus, sensitive community issues, that we should be impaired in any way by alcohol. We do talk about our city also being a healthy and active community, and I just think it's so important to practice what you preach in that regard. And therefore, when we've reviewed this meeting procedures protocol, I think that this is a fairly straightforward addition that would ensure that us as a council, us as councillors, are in line with community expectations.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Gacci Morici, would you like to speak to
Thank
the
you, Madam
amendment?
Mayor. I'm more than happy to support the amendment. I think it is common sense and reflects what we're actually here to do in our time. I think to provide a level of comfort to those at home, of the 3 bottles of wine, I don't drink red, so I haven't noticed the red, but the white wine is a 2016 Chardonnay from Rose Creek that has sat in that bucket for so many consecutive weeks that the label's actually wearing off because no one's opened it. So just for those who sit at home and think that there would be 3 bottles of wine drunk a week, that's certainly not the case. I don't think that I see people drinking very often, but you can certainly see the examples at other local councils who shall remain nameless of where poor decisions are made, poor behaviours occur, all related to alcohol, and I think that this reflects best practice for us to make strong decisions, so more than happy to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Gacci Morici. Any other councillor wish to speak to the amendment? Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'm happy to speak in support of it. I think it is entirely in fitting with expectations in workplaces, which is what this is nowadays. I also feel like I must have been missing a good time because I haven't seen lots of sloshed people walking around here, which is very pleasing. And really, I don't think it's an issue per se, but that said, I think it's really important to have these types of policies when we are making important decisions. And the reality is the CEO has obligations to provide a safe workplace, and we know that in other workplaces that there are incidents that are alcohol fuelled. So I think for the reasons discussed, raised by Councillor Gacci Morici, Councillor Nation, this is entirely pragmatic. It's in fitting with community expectations. It's not something that I see as being an issue at this council, but again, let's make sure it's not an issue for future councils.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I support the motion, and for one who has never consumed alcohol before a meeting in these premises since I've been a councillor, which is only a short time, I guess. I certainly think the best decisions are made with a clear head, and one that we should endorse these type of policies. Just for the record, for the viewers at home, I do use a wine glass to drink out of at council meetings, and I am only drinking Pellegrino and soda water. So there has never been any alcohol consumed in these chambers by myself, so just for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Sypek?
I'm standing to sip on my tea. I don't drink alcohol very much as well. But I think let me start again. Just going to sip on my tea. I'm one who rarely drinks alcohol due to personal health reasons. I find consuming alcohol, in like Councillor Marsh said, in the workplace is also a bit it's one of the practices in the workplace. But there's also random breath testing. Do we go that far as well? Do we random breath test councillors and officers before we come to a meeting? Where is this going to stop, councillor? I'm not too sure. But I think the community would probably want councillors drug tested for some of the decisions that we make in here, and that's right across the whole of Victoria. I reckon that would be the case. I don't know. I understand what you're trying to say, and I totally agree with it. Maybe we shouldn't consume alcohol beforehand, but 3 bottles of wine, how many are still left in there? 2.5? Maybe one or 2 glasses were taken. I don't know. I think we're all adults here. I think we all understand that we are making some big decisions, some community decisions. But I don't think in my 15 years here in council I've ever seen anyone consume more than 1 glass, 2 glasses maximum, absolute maximum. And I think Moonee Valley has a very good track record of having good councillors in that respect.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Any other councillor? I think Councillor Cusack.
Yep. Well, I don't support the amendment at all. And I'm not so sure that our community expects a standard whereby you can't enjoy a dinner and have something that is not like a glass of wine with it. I don't know that that's necessarily a community standard that you would need to comply with. We're talking about decision making here, and the decision making that I'm interested in is the decision making that comes out of good preparation before a meeting. Preparation that involves reading your papers, preparation that means having had a conversation and discussion with officers to clarify whether you've got an issue or not. And I would have thought that as representatives of our community, we are always expected to be able to disport ourselves in a sensible and measured sort of way, irrespective of whether it's a meeting that is in council or before a council meeting, or whether we're at a function of any sort, and I don't care what that might be, whether it's cutting the cake at the local, whatever. And I suspect that also we have to, as adults, exercise a level of self-regulation. I also wonder, and within that, we are also a collegiate group. And if we can't talk to each other about our consumption of alcohol and so on like that, I'm a bit amazed by that. And secondly, I think the Mayor would have a role in sort of saying, well, listen, you're not in a fit state to do something. People have other reasons why they might be impaired in terms of their decision making. Councillor Sypek referred to drug taking, but many's a time I've fronted up to this council conscious of the fact that I'm taking drugs that relate to having cancer that may, in fact, make me slow right down and make me slow down to the point where my decision making is potentially compromised. I don't know for sure whether that's happened, but I've discussed that with my oncologists and other experts. I think the question of health is another interesting one. This is not a health question if I can see in our fridges sugary drinks that are sitting there. This is far from a health question. This is something about something wowzerish, which really worries me. I also take on board that I went to the Mercedes engine factory in Germany in 2000 and watched 3,000 workers there, and they are allowed at any time of the day to go to the fridge and get a beer. And they supply every engine for every Mercedes-Benz vehicle worldwide. They are not impaired in their judgment on that basis. And I think that we have going down a very strange track here. And I don't think that as adults, people who are voted into public office should be judged on whether you've had a drink beforehand. I will also go on record and say I've been on council since November 2005 and I've never ever had a drink before a meeting of any sort with anybody. And I have enjoyed a drink, maybe in certain company, but that has not been the formal process.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Any other councillor? I think hands up. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that Councillor Nation hit the nail on the head when he said it doesn't pass the pub test, and it's as simple as that. I absolutely understand what Councillor Cusack is saying, because people need to be responsible about their use of alcohol, but I see it as it doesn't really need to be there. There are 3 bottles of wine out there, and I checked, and I reckon there's 1 glass taken out of one of them, and I couldn't even be sure whether that glass was even drunk tonight. I'm pretty sure we re-screw the tops. And so who's to say? I would actually be really interested to know how much has been spent on alcohol, because if anyone's listening at home and thinking that everyone just goes behind closed doors and drinks wine before we come out, this completely doesn't happen. I wouldn't have even known that there were bottles of wine in there, and it is just a really poor perception. But if it puts it at the community's ease that there won't be any wine sitting in a random room, then so be it. But it really doesn't get drunk, so it's but happy to support it because it doesn't matter either way.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Any other councillor? Put your hand up. Anybody else? Councillor Nation. No, there's no right to reply on amendments at all. Sorry, no, it's an amendment. So everyone's spoken, so I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Nation, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Gauci-Marici, Councillor Lawrence. All those against? Councillor Sypek, Councillor Sharp and Councillor Cusack. That formal amendment is carried, so that now becomes part of the substantive motion, which is above in front of us. So I will go back to speakers for the substantive motion, including point F. And Councillor, we had a mover and a seconder. Councillor Sypek, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Marshall and Councillor Nation had spoken to that substantive motion. So does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Gauci-Marici.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will fairly briefly. I think the others have comprehensively covered some improvements and revisions, but I think that the process that just occurred was a perfect example of why we revise meeting procedures. We have obviously been live streaming for a couple of years, and I think that the piece that we hear the most from people watching at home is there's a level of clumsiness sometimes from councillors in how things happen, and the ability to move an amendment in writing that can be read and put straight up on the screen, or typed and emailed so it can go straight up on screen so that we don't have to have a 5-minute adjournment, is a perfect example of where we need some revisions to the meeting procedures. Because for those sitting at home who might be enjoying their glass of wine, you may not want to wait 5 minutes to figure out what Councillor Nation just said as an amendment that we were thinking about. So I'm more than happy to support the original motion as well as the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? No? I shall put that to the vote then. All those in favour? Councillor Nation, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Gachimuchi and Councillor Lawrence. All those against? Councillor Sypek and Councillor Cusack. That motion is carried. So agenda 10.7 is the mobile food vehicle policy 12-month review. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Lawrence, thank you.
Move the motion in the way of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconder for the mobile food vehicle policy, Councillor Nation. Are there any questions, councillors? Otherwise, I'll ask Councillor Lawrence to speak to the motion. No. If you'd like to speak, Councillor Lawrence, thank you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. The 12-monthly report for the mobile food vehicles has come around rather quickly. In fact, there hasn't been a great demand for permits from the report, which, whether that's good or bad, I'm not sure. But and those vehicles that have been issued with a permit are all operating effectively. Not sure what effectively means, but I dare say that it relates to any issues and problems, so we can take that for what it is. And that most vehicles meet the Food Act 1984 as inspected by the Council of Environmental Health Officers. It all seems to be going pretty well so far, so good, and so I commend the report to my fellow colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak to the motion?
Briefly, Mayor, as Councillor Lawrence has spoken to, it's a fairly straightforward report. I think it's a good report as the mobile food vehicles policy was a new policy Council adopted in 2018. So ensuring we do these 12-month reviews, particularly with a new policy, is really important. It gives those covered by the policy, but also officers, councillors, broader public a chance to contribute, and us as a council to tweak things that need to be tweaked. As for the actual report, it's fairly self-explanatory, but it is good to look at all policies and tweak and amend them where we need to.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Gachimuchi.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually won't be supporting this policy. I took a review of operation to mean that we would understand if any issues were occurred. The language between a report and a review has been used interchangeably. It has been a review of how many permits have been applied for and how that's operated. We have not proactively asked for any feedback from those permit holders about any issues they have, nor did we obtain any feedback from those who didn't obtain permits as to why they didn't. So that's something that I specifically asked about, because my understanding of a review would be that we would review the policy and its operation, not just report back on what happened. So I won't be supporting the report.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Lawrence, would you like to close?
Nothing further really to add. I mean, I think everybody's spoken in relation to the report as it's presented, and we put it to the vote, I think, Madam Mayor.
Could I foreshadow an alternate if the motion's lost?
Foreshadow, yes. Okay, I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Sypek, Councillor Nation, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Lawrence. Oh, all those against? Councillor Marshall, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Gachimuchi. That is carried on the casting vote of the Mayor. Agenda item 10.8 is the deed of renewal of lease, JP and RA Cunningham over part of Queen's Park. Do I have a mover, please? Councillor Gacci Marici. Do I have a seconder? Oh, what are you moving?
The officer's recommendation.
Thank you.
The officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Nation. Are there any questions, councillors? Otherwise, Councillor Gacci Marici, would you like to speak to the motion?
Completely briefly, I think it is obviously procedural. I think many a parent who has stood at that cafe appreciates the existence of this cafe right next to that playground. I think many people who go to Queen's Park for recreation enjoy this cafe. I think that for those who don't fit into either of those other categories, they've recently started doing Friday and Saturday night occasional trade, so you have no excuse now not to check it out. But I think for us, this is a utilisation of a facility that would otherwise sit there and not be used effectively, so happy to see it renewed.
Thank you, Councillor Gacci Marici. Councillor Nation, would you like to say a few words? Any other councillor? Councillor Cusack?
I'm not exactly speaking against the motion. In fact, I'm quite happy with it in a sense, but I just would like to, I suppose, flag the idea that our council needs to think about, when we're looking at deeds like this, about how we can potentially weight them so that there is some positive discrimination and employment opportunities for people with these when these sort of circumstances arise in the future. And in particular, I'm thinking about opportunities for people to do, whether are traineeships or apprenticeships, and whether they are possibilities around, obviously, people from disadvantaged and vulnerable backgrounds be given an opportunity, and that we work down that track. But I'll leave that for a motion for council for the future.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Otherwise, I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. The next item is 10.9, and it relates to the response to the petition regarding the Boulevard Aberfeldy. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Motion for 10.9, response to petition. Councillor Gacci Marici, what would you like to move?
The officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Lawrence, thank you. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Gacci Marici, would you like to speak to the motion?
I will. Obviously, this is what happens when residents submit petitions to council. They come back to us in the form of a report that responds to those petitions. The response and the recommendation obviously reflects the feedback of the residents. In the short term, I note that there is a reduction of spots, which will obviously hopefully be increased through indented parking over the longer term. The one part I would like to draw the attention of anyone who's watching at home to is under 2.3, there will be restrictions that would be applied to those spots as part of the design stage, so that if they are for visitors to Riverside Park, there would be time restrictions on those indented parking. So.
Thank you, Councillor Gacci Marici. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, all the properties, I'll just go back. The parking along the boulevard is a bit of a dog's breakfast. Cars often, as those who travel along that boulevard will see, park on the nature strip regardless of restrictions or whatever that happens to be in place, and which literally is not what we want to see happen in our municipality, particularly along there where we've got the beautiful Maribyrnong River and the issues that parking on nature strips bring. The boulevard and this petition didn't want angled parking, but they wanted the parallel type parking to be indented. However, council officers have said, well, you know, that's not what was really what they're after, and the council officers agree that, and I concur with them, that we don't really want to have parking either on the nature strip or indented parking in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Byrne.
I will. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And as I read the actual recommendation, I'm supportive of the recommendation, but it has highlighted a few red flags for me, the report. So the way I read the recommendation is to not include the curbside parking between Brunel and Faulkner, basically because the residents didn't want the parking there, and to advise the residents of that. What Councillor Gauci-Merici alluded to was in 3.1, I believe, which was 3.1, sorry, 2.3, which isn't actually in the recommendation but just in the body of the report, that parking restrictions may be required to facilitate turnover. Now, this somewhat concerns me because I don't believe there is anywhere else in the municipality that we would be giving residents free indented parking into nature strips. And I think that there's just red flags, just absolute alarm bells going off in my head. People park illegally and that's just their decision to do so. If people want to knock down a house and put up units that don't have enough parking and then decide to park on our crown jewel, on one of our biggest landmarks, because the development that they've built or that they've bought into doesn't provide the adequate parking, there's some issues there. Now, I grew up in Aberfeldy and I'm down the river all the time, and I have seen this happen over years, and I understand that there is a parking issue. And if we make the decision that we need more parking for visitors to enjoy the lifestyle of the river, run the river, go to the pirate ship park, that's one decision. If we are paying a lot of money to be providing resident car park, indented resident parking, I think that there are some significant issues there. So I'll be really interested to hear what other councillors have to say, and potentially Councillor Gauci-Merici, because I would be really interested to know also what residents throughout the municipality that we have told over and over again we are not paying for your indented parking have to say about this, unless we somehow make it clear to the residents along the boulevard that it is definitely for visitors, potentially timed. 3 hours seems nice. You get to walk around the river, you get to have a coffee and a bit of, extra time just in case you're a little bit slower. But it's not for residents' cars. That's my understanding. But as the actual recommendation is, those 2 points are fine. But as I said, it's just what I can see potentially coming in the future that there may be some issues with. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Marshall?
I very much share the concerns of Councillor Byrne, and I suppose in some ways I'm confused about the indented parking point because it has been consistent through every planning app, through every time it's raised with officers, that it is not an idea that is supported. It's inconsistent with greenery, it's incredibly expensive. So I suppose, again, I'm just mindful, and I know this is an area in a range of different suburbs in Moonee Valley that they have had the requests for indented parking and been told no. And I can think myself of a number of examples of people who have made this request and been told, well, no, you can't have it, or you're going to have to pay for it yourself. So it doesn't sit well with me, and it doesn't sit well with me because in this instance, there is that concern that council will spend a very large amount of money, potentially. I mean, these car parks, I'm not sure whether we know how much that they will ultimately cost for construction, but we know how expensive it is. We've done the exercise with car parking I think one car parking that was proposed, I think I calculated about 60 grand per car parking spot. And that was for line marking and to surface, not to actually do the indentation itself. So, look, I just wonder, this will set a precedent that concerns me significantly. And again, going to a point raised by Councillor Byrne about providing car parking, which might ultimately be used just by residents. I totally get the demand issue and how the challenges around and how we manage that, but is it really a good use of potentially a couple of $100,000 to be going down this path? As I said, inconsistent with every other piece of advice that I've ever had when I've raised this issue with officers. And it doesn't sit well with me, so I don't feel I'll be able to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Sypek?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've heard the arguments for and I've heard the arguments against, and both arguments are very, very valid. But I just want to take you down history lane a little bit. Centreway Shopping Centre, that had parallel parking on the outside, and on the inside it was straight 90-degree angle parking, and it was very, very limited. We spent a fair bit of money there to put angular parking on the outside, which increased the parking, and on the inside we encroached a little bit into the park and made it angular parking, and we virtually doubled the parking space in there, and that's been a fantastic success. Along Fullerton Road, we had Nidri Primary School, and there was always a pick-up and drop-off cluster there where there was just cars everywhere. Residents couldn't get out of their houses, and we, back in I think it was 2003, but even before I came on council, we did indented parking along Fullerton Road, so mums and dads can park their cars there, walk up to the school, pick the kids up. Another great success. I understand about indented parking, with developments, and if it's in front of the actual property, I tend to agree with you. But this is across the road. This is not in front of the residents. So I don't see it as a residence's intended parking on their houses.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. Point of order. Statements that are likely to mislead or deceive a person.
Point of
Clause
order
2B.
is being called.
I believe that the indented parking is in front of the residents' houses.
Is it? I thought it was across the road.
Sorry, this motion is actually to say not to include it, but I'm assuming that you're talking about between Afton and Faulkner.
I'll have to rule on the point of order, Councillor Byrne. The point of order relates to the statement about not being in front of houses. Is that what you're stating? So from what I can see in the plan here, the proposed parking is to be included on the other side of the road, which I think Councillor Sypek did mention.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
It's not directly out front of properties, it's on the other side of the road. So I won't, I'll disallow that point of order because I believe that Councillor Sypek did say that it was on the other side of the road.
As a point of clarification, I'm referring to between Afton and Faulkner, not between Faulkner and Brunel. And here is, if you wanted to have a look at those ones.
I'm looking at them here. Yep. I've got, what's that over there? That's the one, this is what we're talking about in this motion.
No, but not what Councillor Sypek was talking about.
Well, what we're talking about in this motion is attachment B here, unless someone can correct me with that.
Could I clarify what I said? I did say not on the resident side, but on the other side. That's what I was referring to, Councillor Byrne.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Mayor, can I foreshadow a motion to defer this item?
You can foreshadow that, to defer this motion. I'll just need to deal with what is what Councillor Byrne has raised.
I thought it was
Attachment B. This recommendation relates to attachment B, which is what I'm looking at here. I have to disallow that point of order because I don't believe Councillor Sypek was making a misleading statement, because he did state that it was not outside residents' homes, as in it's on the other side of the road, which is correct according to attachment B. You're looking at further detail, but this recommendation relates to attachment B, which is what I've got in front of me. So, if Councillor Sypek, did you wish to continue speaking?
Oh, just for a brief moment. And like I said, it refers to the other side of the road. And if you have a look at the post and fence on the other side of the road, it, if we did make indented parallel parking there, it would actually widen the boulevard, because I've driven down there numerous amount of times. And if there's a car park on where the resident side is, if there's a car park there, two cars can't go, one has to stop and allow the other. I also have concerns about emergency vehicles. I also have concerns about rubbish collection there as well. So if it was widened a little bit and the cars were off the road and in the indented side of things, I think there will be room for traffic to go both ways. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Nation?
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll ask a point of clarification through the Chair. In regards to attachment B, the top image or the bottom image, which is consistent with the motion before us?
Attachment B. Ms Writer, would you be the most appropriate person to direct that point of clarification to?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I am. I'm just concerned that the motion before Council is dealing with not doing certain things that are responding to an overall plan, and I'm just concerned as an officer that we might have been better to have briefed councillors more thoroughly on this report generally.
Okay. That doesn't really answer Councillor Nation's point of clarification, though.
Sorry, thank you. It doesn't. I'll just need to check that and come back to you in terms of which of those images is most representative.
So
okay. Well, we've got.
I was just going to say, look, one of them obviously has 4 areas of parking that are hockey stick line marked. The other has no parking at all. Neither shows indented parking. So yeah, I'm just a little bit perplexed as to what we're actually moving. So I am confused, and potentially Councillor Marshall's foreshadowed a motion to defer. So I can't allude to that foreshadowed motion, but I'll just leave it at that because I don't really know what everyone's talking about.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Gatchmarich, would you like to close?
I will close. I think there has obviously been a very broad discussion about this, but I just wanted to go back to the beginning for everyone. So a full 12 months ago, residents were sent a letter that said, here are some parking changes we are proposing along the boulevard. Some of those changes included providing parallel parking opposite these people's houses. These people said, by way of a petition, we don't want parallel parking there, but if you're going to put parking there, make it indented. We've gone 5 steps forward and made some sweeping presumptions about the fact that those residents would use that proposed indented parking for their own use. We've made presumptions about the fact that we would be paying for parking for the residents as indented parking. What was proposed was parallel parking. The residents said, no, but if you're going to put it there, put it indented. So some money was put into our budget to design some indented parking there. There has been no budget allocated to build those car parks. There's been no discussion about what the time restrictions that would apply to those car parks are. And the proposal for those 4 spots would ideally entirely intentioned for people who visit those parks, particularly the Pirate Park, because there is never parking there, and I've parked on that nature strip and I know I'm not meant to. So provision of parking there, instead of being parallel, would be indented. when it comes back in a future stage, it can have whatever time restrictions. I haven't parked there since I've been a councillor, it's okay. It was before I was a councillor. And so I think we've taken this entire discussion to a completely new level and made a bunch of presumptions about how residents might use car parking that's provided opposite their houses rather than what's actually in front of us, which is just responding to a petition of people who don't want parallel parking outside their house.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Gatchimerici. Just in regards to Councillor Nation's point of clarification earlier, I will ask the CEO just to clarify because I think that might help and will answer your point of clarification.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The top diagram in the picture there is what was consulted on that shows 4 indented parking, and if you can see the cars are parked on the nature strip area below that, the intention was to indent that area where those cars could park off the street. What this report's doing is saying that we're recommending that there be no indented parking in that section of the boulevard. So the question before council is the officer recommending no indented parking in that area.
So thank you. No, sorry, there's no further questions. That's point of clarification answered. So now that motion goes to the vote. So I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Gatchimerici, Councillor Sharp. All those against? Councillor Sypek, Councillor Nation, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Byrne and Councillor Cusack. So that motion is lost. There was a foreshadowed motion by Councillor Marshall. Would you like to read out that foreshadowed
Yes,
motion?
I would like to move that consideration of this report be deferred to an upcoming ordinary council meeting following a briefing of councillors.
Would you like to specify a date?
No, that's fine.
The Councillor Marshall, that is Councillor Marshall's foreshadowed motion. Do I have a seconder for that foreshadowed motion? Councillor Sypek. Do you wish to speak?
I think, frankly, the debate has spoken for itself. There's obviously a significant amount of confusion about what is proposed and perhaps the use of too many knots. But I think it would be worthwhile having a briefing about this, being very clear about the resident concerns and being clear about what the intention is here, what we're seeking to do and how we're going to resolve the particular issue itself and the cost of any resolution. So again, we need to make decisions with all the information at hand and being very clear about what we're deciding on. So I think it would be prudent to defer.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was quite crystal clear on what I was saying, but I'm happy to follow Councillor Marshall and defer this just to make sure that we get this right. I think that's the most important. There's no need to rush this decision. If we make the right decision, that's the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Any other councillor? Councillor Gatchimerici.
I'm more than happy to support the deferral. My only point of comment, question, clarification was going to be that there are the broader changes to parking along the boulevard that are coming before us as a council. The only reason this section came to us because of that petition. So it would make somewhat common sense for that to come to us when the rest comes to us rather than separate it out again. That was all.
Thank you, Councillor Gatchimerici. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Put it to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. The next agenda item is 10.10, response to petition Mascoma Street, Strathmore. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor, I think I just saw you. Councillor Lawrence. Gatchimerici, second. What would you like to move, Councillor Lawrence?
The officer's recommendation. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You happy to second that, Councillor Gatchimerici? Yes. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, this is another petition regarding parking. In this case, we're talking about the parking bays down near the Lebanon Reserve along Mascoma Street that literally opposite the park there, the football ground as it is. And it's the issue of restricted parking on event sport event days at Lebanon Reserve. It's a sort of an issue that relates to the fact that when there isn't a sporting event there, hardly anybody parks there. And then when there is a sporting event, everybody parks everywhere, including on nature strips and everywhere else. So the idea is to try and restrict that parking, and that's been where the issues have arisen, because we've got signs down there that are not, one says no parking on sporting days, and others say, well, restricted parking, especially on sporting days, or something to that nature. The point being that it's hard to, from a law enforcement perspective, from what the report tells us, that is a difficulty to enforce. And now also, given that there's no parking on non-sporting days, that there's adequate and extra local parking at the Lebanon Reserve car park, which is, for those that have looked at the report and the full detail, is only a stone's throw, literally a stone's throw, from most of the properties that are part of this petition. So I agree with the officer's recommendation that the parking restrictions in the area of Mascoma Street be extended to no stopping at all times, so that there's no ability for people to park there, be it on sporting days or non-sporting days, and then it's very clear, it's very concise, and it's very apparent to everybody who's looking to park in that area that you cannot park there. And if your visitors come and they want to go to the residents who have the no standing signs in front of their houses, there is adequate parking in the Lebanon Street Reserve, which is off street, and it's not restricted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Gatchi-Marici.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just really briefly, Councillor Lawrence has covered it pretty comprehensively. I think not dissimilar to the previous discussion, there were parking changes proposed. A letter went out to all residents. Importantly for this one, as per the previous, it is proposed for a much broader section of Mascoma Street. And again, this is just a response to the petition that a group of residents in one block have responded to their part of the proposed changes. So similarly, we are taking on board the feedback of residents and what they would like to see in regard to the proposed parking changes in their area, and that's why I am happy to support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Gatchi-Marici. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Cusack.
Just to note that point B might be a bit difficult to do this year, and it might have to wait until sometime in March, April 2020.
Thank you.
The footy season's finished, basically.
Yes, thank you. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Sypek.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, that does make sense, what the officers are recommending, but I think it's very fortunate for the people in that area that they do have a parking spot across the road at the reserve. So that's very fortunate. If that wasn't there, we could have been in a very bit of a pickle here, and there couldn't be parking anywhere. So I understand the need for the restrictions, and I understand that they're very fortunate to have a park across the road where they can park there when sporting events are not on. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Any other councillor? I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. The next item is 10.1 and relates to the Grants Assessment Special Committee 19 to 20 committee members and charter update. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Sypek.
Happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Lawrence, thank you. Are there any questions, councillors? No. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak to the motion?
I think the item speaks for itself.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence?
I'm sure councillors have all read the report, and it's fairly clear and concise, so no, I don't have anything further to add.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Next agenda item is 10.12, relates to the Assemblies of Councillors report. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Gatchimarachi.
I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please, for that motion? Councillor Byrne. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Gatchimarachi, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, just my usual comment that for those who wonder what we do on the other Tuesdays to when you get to see us live in action, you can see from our strategic briefings what we got up to and discussed. So things around our service planning, around renewable power purchase, around family daycare, corporate professional development. We did some speed reading, and the SKM recycling issues. So, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to the motion? No. Any other councillor? Put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. The next item of business is notices of motion, and there are none tonight. Do we have any items of urgent business? No. Do any councillors have anything that they'd like to report on in their roles as delegates? No. So it brings us to the last item, which is confidential reports. There are no confidential reports on the agenda tonight, so we have come to the end of our meeting. Thank you to members of the public gallery and those watching live stream for your interest. We shall see you in 2 weeks' time. I declare this meeting closed. Thank you.